Hi, I'm Pittaway, and this is one of the videos from a series about transitional vulnerabilities. This particular video is kind of explaining the concept on transitional vulnerabilities. So let's get going. So what we'll be going through here is the vulnerabilities in change, tensions and vulnerabilities, protective buffers, and critical thresholds. So these are the kind of terms that I'm going to be talking about through this process, through this video. So if we look at the sphere, it represents, let's say, a person, or it can represent an organization or an ecosystem, all right, even a nature-based solution. So let's just say the sphere is a representative of any of these units. And within this unit, if we look at a person, we have several latent vulnerabilities. They could be dormant, they are just there. We're aware of them and consider them as hidden. Now, when we are going through change as a person or as an ecosystem or as a business, these vulnerabilities can also change form. So they become dynamic vulnerabilities. It's not latent anymore. It's not sitting in a stable or same state, but it now is changing. The vulnerability is actually changing through this process of time or through its path. Now, often what is experienced through this process are what we call tensions. Some stress or tension that is being applied, or a change, we could say, is a tension, which can affect either a social, economic, or ecological aspect within a business or ecosystem or a community. All right, so let's look at there are external tensions during this path of change, and these tensions can come and go. They can increase. There could be more than one, which then has this effect on the vulnerabilities within this unit. So we had to kind of create a formula with this. We can say that the external tensions during this path of change, all right, amplifies this vulnerability dimension, or can amplify it, not necessarily always. And we could also have one tension only affecting one vulnerability, or we could have two tensions affecting one vulnerability. So there's variance within the system. So here is a symbol of change. So this symbolizes the change of vulnerability is due to the tension affecting the vulnerability. All right, so we've put it in some formula format. There's change in the vulnerability due to a tension on the vulnerability, and that is because of this period of change or this period of transition. Now, sometimes what happens is the vulnerabilities may reach a problem state if that extensional tension or change is too much. It pushes that vulnerability beyond maybe a state of return, or a state where it becomes critical for that organism or for that community. And we call that a critical state. It's a threshold that crosses where it's just too much effect on that vulnerability. So what we ideally like to do is build a buffer. In that zone, that green area there is what I call the buffer. It's protected now through either relationships, people that are around us, or we are strengthened through resilience and capacity. And I'll give an example about the nature-based solution in a forest, where a whole lot of trees that have come together and have been kind of stable together through a long period of time, through the ground, through the root systems, through the soil, through the canopy, create a protective space. And it's that kind of buffer which gives that resilience or that strength for that space, so that if there is a storm on the vulnerability, it kind of can hold. And that's really important. And I quite like the saying is that a vulnerability ultimately is safest in an environment where it is allowed to exist, It's nothing wrong with having vulnerabilities. And I think they have an important place and important part of how we are and how ecosystems develop. So in a nutshell here, we are looking at vulnerabilities that are latent, that can be changed or disrupted due to tensions and pressures. There's a path which these organisms go, which is the transition space. there's a formula which kind of explains to us that there is a change in the vulnerability due to all of these tensions, and sometimes it can be pushed too far into a critical space, but we try to build a buffer zone of resilience through relationships, through capacity. So finally, periods of change can increase vulnerabilities and exposure to risk. Shifting environments or technologies create a sustained stress, and sometimes these stresses over a long period of time. Sometimes these vulnerabilities just cannot maintain that pressure. Resilience and adaptive capacity may or may not be enough to cope with these tensions, and capacity and relationships are also really important in these spaces. People, ecosystems, and organizations can be pushed beyond this dangerous threshold. So this is why we need to understand that vulnerability is not static. It changes during this time of transition. Vulnerability is safest in environments where it's allowed to exist. So it's almost like we need a space for vulnerabilities to feel that they're kind of in a place of belonging, and they're allowed to be there, and we need to be, and it's good that we are aware of them.